if you're watching or listening, and if not, it'll be a replay. This is the candidates forum for October 11th, 2022, Town of Gray State House and Senate candidates. It is a forum structure that we've put together in an attempt to be as fair as possible to all persons who are running for positions. I think that it's important to understand some of the rules of the engagement tonight. We want to make sure that everyone understands that everyone has signed up and is participating. We are coming to you live from the Henry Pennell Municipal Complex in Gray. My name is Mitch Berkowitz, and I'm one of the co-moderators tonight.
Hi, my name is Brad Fogg, and tonight's Candidates Forum is being sponsored by the Town of Gray. For those candidates who are running for House Districts 104 and 105 and Senate District 25. We want to thank again the Town of Gray for hosting the event, and for Gray Community Television and Kyle Hedeniak for broadcasting us live on cable channel 2. And if you're at home, you can grab this on Zoom, or you can go to the Town of Gray's website, graymaine.org. For those that use intelligent phones, which I don't, but Cablecast Screenwave app for smart devices is also being broadcast live there. And sometime before the end of the week, we'll provide the candidates the replay dates so they can inform their constituents if they missed tonight's play. So without further ado, Mr. Berkowitz.
Thank you, Brad. For most of the forum, Brad and I will be trading questions to the candidates. Each candidate will be asked the same questions, and they have about a minute and a half to respond. We have a timekeeper in the audience. These questions cover a range of topics, including challenges facing Maine, economic development, healthcare access, ethics, and more. We also plan to have a few questions from the public near the end of the forum, if time permits. As always, the schedules that we want and the schedules that we end up with are often different. And we don't want this to drag into a 2.5 and 3 hour affair. We think that an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes is probably the tops that we can expect. After that, God only knows what happens. Let's introduce the candidates. For Senate District number 25, Teresa Peirce, if you'd raise your, and Jennifer White. For the House District 104, Amy Arata and Ann Gass. For House District 105, Ann Graham and David Reed.
Okay, folks, there's plenty of questions and not a lot of time, so a lot to talk about. So let's get right down to business, and starting with the opening statements from the candidates. And going first is?
Ann Gass.
So, is this the first question?
This is your
opening statements.
Yeah. All right, so my name is Ann Gass. I'm running for state rep from District 104 as an independent clean elections candidate, because I believe that legislators should work for the people and not for the parties or for big money donors. I've lived in Gray since 1988. My husband and I have raised our children here. I've run my own business since 1993 out of my home, starting before there was even an internet. We were faxing things around, if you can remember those days. And I have absolutely loved living in the town of Gray. I've done a ton of volunteer work here, serving on the school board and the town council and lots of different town committees. I've done land conservation on Libby Hill and trail building and bike and pedestrian safety planning, just all kinds of stuff. I love doing that work, and that's in large part what's motivated me to run for state rep, because I think I've learned a lot about how to do this work well over the years. I love doing this work. It's kind of where my life is, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that in Augusta as well. And I think at the local level, it's not about what party you belong to. It's more about what do we need to do and how much does it cost? Can we afford it? If we can't afford it, what else do we do? Or how can we tweak what we have in mind so that we can afford it or find the money somewhere else? And that's, you know.
30 seconds, please, Ann.
Okay, well, I was looking for the sign there. Sorry, is there confusion? All right, so you know, as I said, I love doing this kind of work. I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it over the years, and I'm looking forward to doing it in Augusta as well.
Thank you, Ann. Second, Teresa Purse.
Thank you so much. My name is Teresa Purse, and I'm running for state senate. I live in Falmouth with my husband, and we have 2 grown children who went through the Falmouth Public Schools. I've spent the last 14 years serving my community, first as a Falmouth Town Councilor, and then as a state representative in the legislature, where I served on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, and most recently as the House Chair of Appropriations and Financial Affairs. When I was 13, my father died, and my mother was able to raise my brother and me because she had a good paying job as a public school teacher, and we lived in a very supportive community. My work in the legislature has focused on those 2 things because I want every Mainer to be afforded that same opportunity that I was growing up, to have a good education and be raised in a great community. I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do in Augusta, particularly in the last 4 years. As House Chair of Appropriations, I championed a bipartisan budget that made historic investments in property tax relief, 55% share of state education, state funds to public school education in our communities,
30 seconds.
and protected our natural resources. But there's still a lot of work to do. My last 8 years has shown me that when we work together, we can accomplish great things for the state of Maine. I want to look at common sense, pragmatic solutions so that every Mainer has a chance to thrive and build the life that they want to do for the state. I want to thank the town for having this tonight. I think this is a great opportunity for us to hear from the candidates, and I'm looking forward to the evening.
Thank you. Next up, Amy Arata.
Good evening. My name is Amy Arata, and I was born and raised in central Maine, where I worked on my grandfather's farm. I earned a Master of Science degree in genetics and worked in laboratories at the University of California, but I was really homesick, so I moved back to Maine with my husband and our 3 boys. We started a difficult business in real estate that was successful even during the Great Recession. I've been on the Planning Board, Budget Committee, Capital Improvement Committee, and School Board. In my 6 years on the school board, I never accepted a paycheck from Gray and New Gloucester taxpayers. I was appointed by the governor to the Maine State Board of Education and voted in by all Republicans and Democrats in the state Senate. I've served in the legislature for 4 years, where I'm on the Appropriations Committee and the Bipartisan Government Oversight Committee. These are difficult, complicated committees. In one meeting, we can go from discussing economic development to the tragic deaths of children involved with Child Protective Services. I've often worked late into the night and even totaled my car when I hit a deer on my way home.
30 seconds.
My education in science has taught me how to think logically and rationally work through problems to find solutions. Also, working on a farm gave me a strong work ethic and appreciation and respect for those who work with their hands for a living. I've worked hard to reduce your taxes and return money to you while increasing support for people who are unable to care for themselves. I want to continue working for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Jennifer White.
Good evening. My name's Jennifer White, and I'm running for state senate here in District 25. I am a lifelong Mainer. I was born in Portland, and I've lived in the greater Portland area my entire life. I've lived in Gray for the past 20 years on Little Sebago. I am a wife, a mother to a son who is 26, and a daughter who is turning 15. I'm a business owner, and one of my businesses is here in North Windham, next town over, providing child care and early childhood programs for children from infants through elementary school. I've been working with children for over 25 years now, probably closer to 28. My state licensed center is a Joyful Noise Christian Daycare and Learning Center. I started close to 24 years ago. Advocating for children and families is one of the reasons that I am running. I'm also self-employed as a licensed real estate broker through my own company, White Wave Real Estate.
30 seconds.
I have a background in nonprofit service and have done many community service projects and trips both here and abroad, including taking high school students. The world we live in is ever changing, and I feel that this next season of my life I would like to serve the people in my district by representing them at the state level and being their voice by supporting policies that will help our children, our schools, our families, and our businesses.
Thank you. Next up, Ann Graham.
Thank you. I want to first thank the community of Gray, the town of Gray, for having this forum. Greatly appreciated to be able to introduce myself to you. I've knocked on close to 1,500 doors, and it's really a joy getting to know Gray and North Yarmouth again. I was your state representative from 2010 to 2014, and during that time I worked on a bipartisan way to get a lot done. I am married to Ron Graham. He is a soccer coach and phys ed teacher at MSE 51, which is Cumberland, North Yarmouth. I have 3 sons, ages 33, 31, and 23. And I'm a super proud mom of all 3 of them. I am a retired pediatric nurse practitioner, and with over 35 years of experience caring for children and their families. I want to continue that type of care for the people of Maine. I want to go back to Augusta. I want to work to grow our economy, ensure that all Mainers are warm, fed, and safe.
Thank you. Last but not least, David Reed.
Hi, I'm David Reed, and I've lived in North Yarmouth for most of my life. I used to be a Democrat, and I'm not anymore. I graduated from USM with a BA in political science. At USM, there was so much turmoil on campus: the repression of free speech, the intimidation of conservative voices who dare question liberal orthodoxy. At one point, there were even roving bands of leftists harassing student senators and students at large, causing disruptions in the office and in the library. In coordination with university administration, leftist activists falsified conduct reports against multiple students. I saw a picture of what our world could become. I entered college a Democrat, and I left as a Republican. I switched parties because the Democrat Party of the 90s is no more. Fiscal responsibility, highlighted by the surplus of 1998 to 2001, has been replaced by printing money and promoting handouts. The party that once stood for free speech has become the party of censorship. Now only one party remains that pushes for a secure border, a strong economy, lower taxes, and American values. This is why I chose to run as a Republican, and these are the values that I wish to bring to Gray and North Yarmouth. When I was on the select board in North Yarmouth, I was willing to work with anyone to get things done. My platform can best be described as fiscally conservative and socially libertarian, and I would ask you all for your vote. Thank you.
Our compliments to each of the candidates. You stayed within the minute and a half, and that was a good practice for the start of the questions. Brad.
Thanks again, candidates. So let's get right into the questions, and we're going to start with Ann Gass. And our first question is, what do you believe are the top 3 challenges facing the state of Maine? In a minute and a half.
So what I hear when I talk to our neighbors in the district are their concerns about the high cost of living. By that I mean the cost of housing, health care, education, childcare. These have all gone up faster than inflation and much faster than wages have risen. And people are really feeling squeezed. And even those who are doing all right are worried about their kids and their grandkids. Will their kids ever be able to move out and get their own apartment or house? Can they afford to buy a home? Can they afford to have a family because of the high cost of just health care? And so they're really worried about these things. They're also worried about inflation. Right now, we're seeing spikes in food prices, in electric bills, and in fuel. And there are people I've talked to who are concerned about whether or not they're going to be able to afford to fill their propane or oil tanks this winter and keep their homes warm. So that's a really scary thing. The third thing I've really heard a lot about are concerns about our aging state. We aren't replacing workers as fast as they're retiring, and older people need services to stay at home. So that's kind of a double whammy. Our employers are already struggling to find workers to fill positions, and including for, in kind of critical positions and essential services. But as our population gets older, folks who, especially those who want to stay at home, are going to need more services. They're going to need health care, they're going to need home supports, and those are the kinds of things I want to work on.
Thank you, Ann. Our next speaker will be Teresa Pearce.
Thank you. I think that the top three challenges facing the state include the workforce and jobs, housing and affordability and aging in place, and also maintaining our great educational system because it feeds into the way that we're going to solve those other two problems. As Ann Gass said, we have an aging population and a very low unemployment rate, which means that we're unable to fill all of the jobs that we have available that we need in our state. My husband owns a small business. I know firsthand that he gets called in frequently to fill in for people because he just can't find enough of the workforce to do that. So things that we worked on in the legislature that I think are helping to do that are some in-migration. People are deciding to move to Maine. That's very helpful, but they need to come to Maine and fill those jobs that we're going to need. We're going to have 5,000 teachers retire in the next 7 years. We have a nursing shortage. We have a shortage also in plumbers and electricians, and so our community colleges will play a vital role in that. And we've been able to have some community college aid given to high school kids to move into some of these jobs. Then with our housing crisis, the affordability and the aging in place, we don't have enough of our stock of houses for people if they would like to move out of their homes. But we also need younger people to be able to buy homes. And so we've worked closely with investing money at the state level with the Maine Housing Authority in order to build more stock around the state. People want to age in place. They want to stay in their homes. And we work very hard to lower the property tax issue that so many people are faced with. We've increased the property tax fairness. We've increased the Homestead Act.
Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, so thank you. And the last one's education. So
Would
just
it
to
be
clarify,
easy-
we're not getting a 30-second.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to clarify.
Would it be easier to flash the sign of 30 seconds and stop from this point or from the audience point? What is your pleasure?
To me, to have her raise the 30 seconds.
Yeah,
That would be the most helpful.
I thought
Don't
that
you
was,
think?
I
I
thought
don't care.
that was what we agreed on, yeah.
Oh, she did flash it? You flashed
She
it?
flashed it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I'll look at you when I'm talking.
Okay. Please pay attention
There's
to
so
the
much to
young
talk
lady in the
about.
front.
She's quick.
Thank
Third
you.
will be
Amy, your turn.
Okay, well, thank you. I've knocked on over 1,640 doors in this district, and the number one concern is the cost of heating oil for the winter. Maine needs to be ready to help people who simply can't afford it. We have the federal low-income heating and energy assistance program that's administered by Maine State Housing, which contracts with the Opportunity Alliance here in Cumberland County to determine eligibility and disperse the money. Based on the bottlenecks they've had with the COVID rent relief program, I think they may need more help getting funds out to people who need it. We can't let people freeze to death while waiting for the bureaucracy to catch up. We also need long-term solutions, such as increasing the supply of other energy sources. The number two concern is overall inflation, in particular with food. Mainers are going to need more money in their pockets to pay for everything. One thing we can do in the legislature is lower taxes, so people will keep more of their paychecks to spend on necessary items. And number three is the overall business environment. Federal regulators are threatening the lobster fishery and paper mills. We also have continuing threats from extreme anti-business legislators in Augusta that would make Maine less competitive with other states. Legislators need to understand that businesses can go anywhere in the country or even in the world, so our tax and regulatory environment must be competitive. If these threats to businesses continue, we may soon face a job crisis in Maine as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
This was a really tough question to narrow down to three challenges. I do agree housing should be in there as well, but economy and inflation, our children's education, and the opioid crisis are the three. Maine families are spending around $450 extra every month right now on regular household bills, food, electricity, and gas, and energy costs. Many of our seniors and families on fixed incomes that cannot afford to pay for heat and electricity this winter, they're gonna need help. We have workforce issues, and I know that firsthand as an employer. Hiring and retaining employees is a real big issue across the state. Our children's education, we need transparency in classrooms. Parents should have a say about sensitive topics being taught in the classroom. Not every family has the same beliefs and values. We need to focus on reading, writing, math, and science again. Parents wish to be the ones guiding their children when it comes to controversial subjects. Politics, agendas, and ideologies need to be left out of our classrooms. The opioid crisis, we need to provide more compassionate treatment programs that are easily accessible for those that are struggling with addiction, but we must also come down tough on those providing the drugs. Unfortunately, Democrats, including my opponent, tried to pass a bill to decriminalize possession of hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl in LD 967. But thankfully it did not pass. I would have not supported that bill. We have too many drugs pouring into our state and targeting our children.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Ann Graham.
Thank you. Well, as Jennifer said, there are multiple problems that we need to face, and my plan is to fight problems, not people. The first issue that I think is paramount is the high cost of living and inflation. Oil to heat our homes is continuing to rise. Gas for our vehicles, although it's gone down a bit, likely will go back up. We know that food prices are high. We will see even higher prices with the crisis in Ukraine, where that's where the majority of the United States gets their wheat. And also the high cost of living creates such economic inequality that individuals really aren't able to have a living wage, so that there's a disparity between lower income and higher income earners. The second thing is healthcare costs. I am on a council on affordable healthcare appointed by the Senate President, and we will tackle that, particularly issues around mental health, which will help us with issues around the opioid epidemic. And the last is our lost trust in democracy, from town government to state government and federal government. Legislators should be public servants, period. Public servants should work for the people every day, for the people of our communities, not for a partisan platform.
And Dave Reed.
Thank you. This is where a political science degree comes in handy, especially one that focuses on foreign policy. Ukraine, I believe, exports a lot of wheat to African countries, and the U.S. produces a decent amount of its own food, so that isn't necessarily the primary driving factor in U.S. food prices. A large cost of food in Maine comes down to the transportation cost that's associated with it. Maine doesn't grow a lot of its own food, so we have to spend a lot more money transporting food into the state. If we could boost our domestic production in Maine, we could lower prices for Mainers. Now, cost of living was also my top issue that I recognize, but I broke up the economic issues into three different parts, because we're heading towards, if not already in, an economic recession. And we need to be ready for the fallout of that as a state. There are some people who want to deny it, but with the Dow and other stocks down close to 20 to 30% since the year's start, it's hard to deny that we're heading towards some potentially tough times. And as was said previously, the cost of oil is skyrocketing, but we should ask, why is the cost of oil skyrocketing? In 2019, the United States was energy independent. We produced the most energy in the world, and now those levels have gone down. If we want to address our energy problem, we need to bolster domestic energy production through renewables and traditional sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Berkowitz.
Thank you, sir. We will start round two, and Teresa Peirce will be the first to answer the following. What solutions are you bringing to the legislature if you were elected?
Thank you so much. During my 8 years in the legislature, we worked on many, many issues. But I think when you think about solutions for Mainers, you really want to make sure that you're focusing on the people that need the help the most. And Mainers are hurting out there. We've heard a lot of people talk about the increase in inflation, the high cost of housing, and other areas there, the supermarket. Energy costs are very, very high. As the chair of AFA, we worked on a number of issues that I think will help. In particular, I'll focus on energy costs since we have limited time here. And that includes investing $25 million in the weatherization of homes. We all know when people's homes are better weatherized, they have lower costs in their in their energy costs. And right now, those programs are up and running. Every Mainer can apply through their town hall and get, I think, up to $100 in order to decide what's best for their home. I think that that'll go a long way to helping people spend less in energy costs and spend it as they see fit. We want to lower everyday costs for people in other areas too. With the large surplus that we did have, which was exciting because we rebounded well from the pandemic, we were able to give back money to $850 checks to 850,000 people. That was a bipartisan plan and thing that we were able to accomplish, and that was exciting. So we found common sense approaches of working together, and I have a proven track record of working across the aisle to find those solutions for people in Maine.
Next up will be Teresa, Amy Arata.
Thank you. I have a proven history of working on solutions that benefit Mainers. I've worked across the aisle to increase housing opportunities, increase the homestead exemption, increase the tax exemption on pension income, and to get excess tax dollars out of Augusta and back into your pockets. Going forward, my priorities include collaborating with businesses, including child care centers, to streamline or eliminate state regulations that aren't needed and are holding them back and causing them to raise prices. Also, you may not know this, but every bill that needs funding has what's called a fiscal note. This is a calculation of how much the bill will cost the state, because it would be irresponsible to pass a bill that we can't afford. You'll hear a lot of politicians bragging about voting yes on almost every bill, but they know they won't all ultimately be signed into law because of the fiscal notes. Voting yes on everything makes some voters happy and may be a political strategy that gets them reelected, but it ignores the reality that we can't afford everything we want without raising taxes. And Maine is already one of the highest tax states. However, I've seen various commissioners claim that they can absorb the cost of certain bills within existing resources, so the bill still passes without the legislature setting aside money to pay for that bill. This simply doesn't make sense and makes me believe that they have too much extra cushion in their budgets. For this reason, one of my solutions is to have an independent audit of every state department to make sure that they aren't wasting your tax dollars.
Thank you, Jen. Next up will be Ann Graham.
So if I'm elected, there are multiple ways we can come to solutions, particularly by coming together and finding common ground. Main issues around the economy is that we can build on a very strong bipartisan budget, a strong foundation that was established in the previous legislature. We can continue to work without raising taxes, which they did not do in this last term. We finally achieve 55% of funding education so that in turn lowers your property taxes because you are not as responsible for those costs. And also continued revenue sharing. When I was in the legislature, the previous administration cut revenue sharing significantly, so towns were hurt. Now it's back to where it should be. I will work to make sure healthcare costs are affordable, keeping drug prices down. We'll keep Medicaid expansion in place and focus on prevention. And lastly, I think that we have to work on in-migration. According to The Hill, Atlas Van Lines has said that Maine is the top choice for domestic moves in the pandemic. We have seen our population increase by 10,000 over the past several years because people are choosing to live in Maine. I saw that at the doors. Many young families, people bringing their businesses now that they can remote work. This is what we need to do because we have an aging population.
Thank you very much. I made a mistake and went out of order, and I apologize
That's okay.
to all. Jennifer, my apologies. You're up next.
So with the economy, I do not want to see Mainers having to pay more out-of-pocket money for taxes, like the proposed gas tax that many Democrats supported. We need to keep costs down. We need to make sure that we have funding in place to help seniors heat their homes this winter. We need to get our capable workforce back to work so businesses can thrive again, and remove any unnecessary barriers that hinder businesses from operating. Legislators had a chance to vote to increase the homestead exemption from $25,000 to $50,000, which would help lower the tax burden on homeowners. Unfortunately, Democrats voted against this bill. I think increasing the homestead exemption would have been helpful to homeowners, and I would have supported that. In education, I am an advocate for school choice. With disruptions in learning this past year, parents became more aware and concerned with the quality of their children's education. We also need more transparency in our schools and stronger partnerships between teachers and parents. According to the National Center for Education statistics, our math and reading scores fell to a level not seen in decades. We need to remove the politics and ideologies out of classrooms, like I mentioned before, and allow our teachers to focus on teaching the fundamentals like reading, writing, math, and science.
David?
Thank you. So the reason why our state didn't experience many new taxes throughout the pandemic was because of the $4.6 trillion in federal stimulus spending that were sent out to the various states. Now, my question to you all is, what do we do as a state when that stimulus money dries up and we're left with a lot of programs and expansions from the pandemic era, heading into an economic recession? We have to be ready to make cuts from some of those pandemic era programs. We have to grow Maine's domestic food production to bring down the cost of food. We need to address our worker shortage to bring down the cost of housing. We need to make Maine a more desirable state to relocate. A lot of the people who moved here during the pandemic were coming up here from Massachusetts and New York. Now, compared to those states, we have a very, very generous tax code. We're lower compared to them. But compared to many other states, we're not that business friendly. In fact, I think CNBC ranked us as the 43rd most business-friendly state in the country. If we want to improve on those numbers, it means we're going to have to make some cutbacks and make our state a more desirable place to do business. Now, I talked about the need for energy independence as well, and in Maine we are in a unique position where I believe 75% of our domestic energy production comes from renewable energy sources. And we can build off of that and make ourselves energy independent, but mostly off of renewable resources. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And gas?
So as an indie, I'm all about leadership, not partisanship. We have to be able to come to an agreement on things, and I've proven that I can do that in my service on the town council, on the school board, in my other volunteer work, and in my business. Finding solutions to the challenges that face us requires having an awareness of what works and what hasn't worked, whether it's in Maine or in other states. And in my business, part of my work has been writing federal grants for my clients, and on a wide range of topics. These grants are complicated. They require knowledge of policy, program design, budgeting, business planning, and I've written over 100 successful grants to the tune of $168 million. Most of that money came to Maine. So I'm really good at coming up to speed quickly on different policies and figuring out what makes the most sense in Maine. Teresa mentioned that the state has launched the tuition program for community college students. That's an example of a solution I think makes a huge amount of sense. It's a strategic investment in our young people, and the young people that I've spoken to are so excited about that program because they know that it means a future for them that's free of crippling debt and sort of a roadmap to a job that can allow them to continue living in Maine. So I'd like to explore more of those kinds of solutions.
Thank you very much. Round 3.
Our next question, and we'll be starting with Amy Arata on this one, is how do you propose to assure the people of your district that the state will continue to support economic development?
Thank you. I've already done this. I've already worked to improve the incentives for economic development in Maine. For example, I noticed that the Employee Tax Increment Financing Program paid business owners a lower benefit for employees with children than for those without children. I sponsored a bill to make it equal while not reducing the benefit to employers, and this bill passed unanimously. The state of Maine has dozens and dozens of tax incentives, tax exemptions, and business grants for economic development. I'm a member of the Bipartisan Government Oversight Committee, and we're responsible for evaluating about 128 of them. There are tax incentives for shipbuilding, movies, business headquarters expansion, space corporation bonds, and seed capital for new businesses, to name just a few. I believe it's unfair to give special tax treatment to certain new businesses in the name of economic development while we leave existing businesses with high taxes. The government shouldn't pick winners and losers. We should have a low-tax, business-friendly environment for everybody in Maine, especially those businesses that have been here paying taxes for generations. However, I have said publicly that I'm also not going to pull the rug out from under a business that has made investments based on the tax incentives that we already offer. We need to keep our promises. That's why if I'm going to vote to end a tax incentive, I'll insist that we give plenty of notice of when that incentive will sunset. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer, please.
Without economic development and a healthy economy, our state will never be prosperous. One thing that we can do moving forward is we need to respect and support that our business owners will make the best possible decisions for their businesses when it comes to keeping their customers and employees healthy and safe during an emergency. We cannot afford a repeat of 4 shutdowns. I will support economic development across our state by supporting bills that are pro-business friendly. We need to attract new businesses, get our workforce back to work, and that includes our medical professionals who were fired from their jobs for not getting vaccinated. We also need to do everything we can do to preserve our lobster industry, which is vital to the very identity of our state. We cannot sit back and allow our lobstermen and women to have their livelihoods taken away. We need to look at relaxing some of the unnecessary regulations that our state government is imposing on industries and do everything we can to help businesses thrive across our state.
I believe Ann Graham's
Ann
next.
Graham.
Yes, thank you. I think the way we invest in our people, the way the state government can invest in our people, is to continue to tap Maine's entrepreneurial spirit. Live and Work in Maine is a program that's been in place, established by a young man who went to high school with one of my sons. And he has started Flight Deck Brewing, and that is one example. Birchwood Brewing right down the road. Every time you turn around, there's a new, exciting, young business. And the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, go to their website. You'll see all the things, all the work, the investment has happened over the past several years, particularly with the Recovery Act funds. The Maine government has invested nearly $1 billion in startup businesses, and particularly working too on businesses that will help with our energy costs, such as Revision Energy, which is a leading solar developer. And then we also have many heat pump developers, so that we can move into the economy and be able to save money and continue to grow our economy. And I believe a state government has an important role in that.
David.
I've already talked about how I feel about the need for reforming our tax code and giving tax cuts to entrepreneurs. So I want to talk about another angle of attracting businesses to Maine, which is our education. Over the past couple decades, and when I was going through high school, they were phasing out industrial arts and trades programs from middle schools and high schools and replacing them with STEM. So in 7th grade, when I was in the middle school, we had industrial arts. We built clocks, and we got to see how different structures performed under load. And then the year after that, we had STEM, where the most memorable project was building a roller coaster on Minecraft. Now, does that sound very educational to you? Come to your own conclusions. We need to bring back the trades to Maine middle and high schools, and we need to train people who can build the things that others design. We can't just make a bunch of designers, we need builders.
And yes?
So when I served on the town council, I used to say we're all on Team Gray. And now I'm expanding that to we're all on Team District 104 or sometimes, Team Maine. The point is, in order for us to succeed, we all have to work together. That's what winning teams do. In my experience, people work best when there's a shared vision and a plan for getting close to that vision over the short and the long term. Now, the state has created some really good economic development plans that I think we should be implementing. This will require teamwork. We all have a role to play at the local, the state, and the federal government level, as well as in the business community. Strategic infrastructure investments on the part of local and state governments can allow the business community and Maine people to prosper. I'm thinking of things like high-speed broadband, which is needed to support entrepreneurs like me and people who now work from home. More housing for workers so people can live in or near the towns where their jobs are located, and that'll reduce their transportation costs too. Quality, affordable childcare so parents can go to work, and affordable health insurance so people who want to start their own businesses don't have to be afraid that they'll lose it when they leave their regular jobs. So as a state rep, I plan to support all those kinds of programs.
Thank you. Teresa?
Thank you so much. What will I do to continue to support economic development? Excuse me. I've been doing that all along for the last 8 years. I'm a supporter of the 10-year economic plan and the economic recovery plan that were put in place in the last 4 years. I also was instrumental in helping to increase the Maine Seed program, which was one of the programs that Representative Arata mentioned. That encourages our small businesses and supports those as well, and that's critical to our success. We all know that small businesses are the heartbeat of our state. In addition to that, though, tourism is one of the heartbeats of our state, and specifically with economic development. I met a lot of people at the Gray Blueberry Festival. It was a really fun day for me. I hadn't been out to that before, and who I met, not only people from Gray and surrounding communities, but I met some people from Georgia and Texas, and they'd moved here. And they'd moved here because they'd spent time here in the summer and in the winter. They came during those tourism seasons. And so I think it's important that we maintain our investment in our tourism industry. That includes a couple of things. We're investing $50 million in putting into our state parks to upgrade those from where they've been maybe a little dilapidated. We didn't have any funds to work on that, but we do now, and so I think that that's a great incentive. And we've also put $40 million into the Land for Maine Futures program, which is another way that we're protecting our environment, encouraging tourism, and making sure that people want to come back and live in Maine, and people are doing that. I'm very proud of that. LMF, the Land for Maine Future, Gray actually was a beneficiary of that with the Thayer Preserve.
Thank you. Mr. Berkowitz with our next question.
Thank you. You're all doing well. You're halfway through, and at the rate we're going, we may be able to provide the audience with several questions and not just one or two. All right, on round 4, Jennifer White is first up.
The question.
Oh, you want a question too? What role do you see for the state government in assuring access to health care and services, including reproductive rights?
As far as healthcare, I support our nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and similar caregiving institutions to make sure they are funded and can afford to hire and retain the professional staffing they need. They're really struggling right now. I believe the government's role is to make it so that health insurance is as affordable as possible and not put roadblocks in place that make it more costly. The ideal healthcare system would include accessibility for all Mainers, regardless of insurance, transparency up front when it comes to costs, competition among health insurance companies, and immediate help for those who need it without having to wait weeks and months to be seen by a PCP or a specialist. Democrats voted in favor of legislation that was passed that resulted in an increase in health insurance premiums of $600 a year. I would not support legislation that would increase health insurance cost if elected, and I would support legislation that would help bring the cost down.
Thank you. And gas would be next.
And Graham.
And Graham, I think, yeah.
My apologies, Ann Graham.
That's all right. Sounds the same.
Pretty close.
I can't read my writing.
Well, I think it's important that state government is involved in ensuring access to health care, including reproductive rights. Maine has one of the highest levels of insured individuals because we finally passed Medicaid expansion. And the Affordable Care Act's marketplace. I currently work part-time at LL Bean, and I'm on the marketplace, and I pay $20 a month for my health insurance, a comprehensive, good program that anybody can afford. We need to hold insurance companies and hospital systems accountable to keep costs down. We need to further codify the right to choose in Maine. The decision of if, when, and how to have a child is deeply personal. A woman and her family should decide what is right for them. Politicians should not interfere. A woman's decision about her own health care should be made between her and her health care providers, not government. Abortion should be rare, safe, and legal.
Thank you. David Reed?
I've split this into three portions because there are three different things that I must address here. So government's role in healthcare generally is to provide limited programs that protect those who truly need it, the poor, the elderly, and the disabled. Now, as far as reproductive rights goes, on abortion, we should not further restrict the legality of abortion in the state of Maine. The viability standard is sufficient, and I think many people can agree on that with that polling. As far as government funding for abortion goes, the Hyde Amendment, which was passed in 1976 with the affirmative votes of 107 Democrats and 92 Republicans, forbid tax dollars from paying for abortion unless a mother's health was in danger or in cases of rape and incest. This compromise has stood as the standard for the federal government and most state governments for 46 years. Until 2019, it stood as the standard for Maine. Radical Democrats made the move to break the old compromise. When we must resist attempts from the far right to outlaw abortion, we must also resist attempts from the far left to force government to pay for abortion.
Thank you. Ann Gass?
I think we can all agree that making a baby is one thing, but growing a baby inside of you is quite another, especially if you don't have the freedom to make that choice. I have a friend who's happily expecting her first child, and I asked her, what do you think about forcing a woman who doesn't want to be pregnant to go through what you're experiencing now? She said, I can't even imagine. I'm more pro-choice than I've ever been now that I'm pregnant. I don't see how anyone can say that they support women's equality and not support women's freedom to get the reproductive health care they want and need, including abortion. The vast majority of our neighbors support a woman's freedom to choose whether to be pregnant and have a child, even when they themselves say that they would never have an abortion. So I strongly support Maine's current laws and practices around abortion rights and access to contraception. Beyond reproductive justice, I know that Maine can't afford to solve the healthcare crisis all on our own, but I support the Medicaid expansion and other efforts to expand access to healthcare and to prescription drugs, and also to dental care, because that's often not included in health insurance. Lack of health insurance throttles economic development. I've been a small business owner for 29 years, and if it weren't for the health insurance my husband brings home, I'm not sure I would have been able to have my business.
Thank you, Ann. Next up will be Teresa Peirce.
Thank you. In June, the Supreme Court took away a constitutional right for a woman to make the choice of whether or not to continue a pregnancy, and it put it at the state levels, at the state level, with the state legislatures. I have voted to support a woman's choice to choose for years. I continue to do that. I voted at the state level to continue the current Maine law that we have. I think that that's important. That was put in place in 1973 by Governor Jack McKernan and the legislature, and I will do nothing to hinder that. I have also taken votes against things that have tried to eat away at the ability for people to receive abortions. So you've seen that in other states where they don't have as many opportunities for women's health care in rural areas. And we don't want to have that happen here either. So I'm proud of my record on women's reproductive rights. It's a decision between her and her family and her doctor, and it should say squarely there. And I will absolutely do that. You know I will do it because I voted that way. In addition to other healthcare issues, though, we've done a lot of work. We extended Medicaid expansion to over 70,000 people. We provided Meals on Wheels for $250K. That was a great thing. People need to be fed, especially the older elderly that need that, people coming into their home. We increased healthcare for kids around the state with the CHIP bill. That was very important. It was part of the bipartisan budget that we just passed. We improved oral health care for over 200,000 Mainers so that they can have regular dental care. And we also invested in the Doctors for Maine's Future, which puts more primary care people into the state.
Thank you very much. And Amy Arata.
Well, thank you. Well, access to health care involves so much more than whether the government pays for it or not. In order to have health care, we need to have the doctors who provide it, and we have a doctor shortage. Too many doctors move to Maine to start their career and then leave to make more money in other states that have lower taxes. They also want to have a broad choice of good schools for their children. I had a doctor who left Maine primarily because of the schools. He also mentioned that he was exhausted by the paperwork that took up more time than actually treating patients. The legislature can help with good education policy and by not adding to the regulatory burden. To help with the doctor shortage, the legislature has funded the Doctors for Maine's Future program, which is a scholarship for medical students from Maine who go to Tufts or UNE. However, I said at the public hearing for this spending that it's unfair to exclude children of Maine taxpayers who don't get into those two schools. So if we're going to offer this, we should expand this program to all Maine students who attend an accredited medical school. Having more doctors with a connection to Maine will have a huge impact on access to medical care, regardless of if it's Maine care, private insurance, or paid out of pocket. I'm also on a legislative panel to study the implications of gene therapy technology in Maine. There's a shortage of genetic counselors, so if you find out you carry a gene for breast cancer, for example, you may have to be seen by a genetic counselor from Massachusetts. I'm working with this commission to come up with bipartisan legislation to encourage more geneticists to work in Maine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, and we'll start with Ann Graham on this question, is what is the relationship between ethics and politics? People want to know.
I think the relationship between ethics and politics is the same as ethics and life. And how we live, whether we're honest, whether we have integrity, whether we walk the walk, not just talk the talk. What do I mean by that? I mean that we help volunteer at food pantries, that we honor our veterans, that we respect the history of our state and our country by listening to one another, even when we disagree, and bridging partisan divides. It's about community. It's not adhering to a partisan platform. It's about bringing people together. I've knocked on many, many doors, and people are tired of the us versus them, the far right, the far left. They want people to come together. I passed 9 bipartisan bills in my 4 years in the legislature. 9 bipartisan bills with Republicans from Aroostook County. We need to stop the us versus them. We need to bring people together. We need to be ethical, honest, and have integrity.
Thank you, David.
All right. I look to both sides of the aisle, especially on the national stage, and it's sad you can't seem to find much of a connection between ethics and politics these days. Most politicians should have a moral and ethical core that defines their decision-making process. My core beliefs are in honesty, fundamental fairness, and consistency. And there may be times when where these beliefs conflict with the interests of my own party. and those beliefs will win out. I'd also have to say that many of these topics we've been talking about tend to get oversimplified, and people don't like to talk on the specifics all that much. And this follows up on the previous question, which was on abortion. On prior statements, Anne has talked about believing that abortion should be legal in all cases. And I'd like to pose the question, does Anne believe in abortion past viability, which under state laws, when a child can exist outside of the womb under their own body or with medical assistance?
Under the rules of the forum this evening, this is not a debate, but if Ann chooses that the next time she's up to use some of her time to answer that, she's welcome to do so as any other candidate. But we do not separate and turn it into a debate.
Okay, thank you. Ann, it's your turn.
My turn.
Yes.
So people elect us to do a job. Quite frankly, I'm running to be a legislator, not a politician. And I think it is possible to be an ethical legislator. We need to insist on our elected officials having integrity. And by that I mean, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's looking. I hold myself to high standards, so I'm not concerned. I'm very comfortable with other people holding me to high standards as well. I'm accountable to my neighbors. As you know, I'm an independent clean elections candidate. I have no agenda other than doing the best job that I can for the people in my district. I've been really encouraged during this campaign because so many people, even conservatives, have told me, I know that you're a person of integrity and I know how hard you've worked for this town, and so that's why I'm going to vote for you. They know that I'm committed to leadership, not partisanship. I've given thousands of hours of volunteer leadership to the town of Gray, and it's worth exploring that a little bit more because I think good leaders are also ethical leaders. In my experience, leaders have their eye on both short and long-term goals. They admit mistakes and accept responsibility. They learn from experience, and they know the difference between speaking truth to power and bullying. And that describes me to a T.
Thank you, Ann. Teresa.
Thank you so much. There is absolutely a relationship between ethics and politics, and it's about your moral values and working together regardless of party. I've said a couple times here that I do chair the Appropriations Committee. We had a bipartisan budget with a unanimous report out of committee. That it takes a lot of work. It has to do with trusting people that you're working with, feeling that they're working honestly and with integrity with you. And I think that we accomplish that in our budget and in all other areas. There's a lot of agreement that we have up at the State House and we work together. But that bipartisan work, that civility that you need to have, I've shown that in the work that I've had done on the Appropriations Committee, also the Education Committee, and just with other people with their bills and the work that we've done. It's important. It's important to have that, and I think that trust has to be there. We're not always going to agree on policy. We don't. That's okay. But we can come to the center, figure out what we can do to help Maine people, and if we do it with integrity and honesty, we can trust people that we're working with, and that's really important.
Thank you. Amy.
Well, my ethics and integrity don't change once I get to the State House. I always try to treat people with honesty, kindness, and respect. So to prove this, I'll give you an example of when my ethics prevailed over politics. My committee was having a public meeting with a commissioner about a project that's cost tens of millions of dollars and was failing. Prior to the meeting, I was told that the commissioner's husband was involved in this project and that there may be some conflict of interest and misuse of taxpayer dollars. I was pressured by a colleague, who is no longer in the legislature, to bring this up in public and embarrass her, embarrass the Democrats, including Governor Mills, who had appointed this commissioner. I did some research and found that the husband's role had been very minor and that he had been a state employee for many years before the commissioner was appointed. I had no evidence on which to base public accusations against this family. The commissioner's a human being who just loves her husband just like I loved my husband. And I wasn't going to violate my ethics to harm her personally in order to advance my politics. Ethics especially applies to campaigning. I've made a commitment that I will not ever say anything negative about my opponent. The same group that's attacking LePage just spent over $3,000 to attack me as well. but I'm not going to respond with attacks, and whether I win or lose, I'll sleep well at night, knowing that my ethics are intact. Republican or Democrat, we're all just human beings who could use some kindness and compassion and deserve to be treated ethically. Good ethics makes good leaders.
Thank you. And Jennifer, please.
I love this question because I do think that ethics and politics go hand in hand. They should go hand in hand. It's a great question, and one that every person running for public office should give thought to. The relationship between ethics and politics, it's important. It should motivate a legislator to pass laws that are aimed at the attainment of ultimate good for individuals and society as a whole. Ethical behavior in politics should embrace the following moral values: integrity, truthfulness, honesty, trustworthiness, fairness, concern for others, and accountability. As legislators, the laws that we pass should serve the public interest with ethical awareness, which brings ethical action, and accountability follows. Many legislators have strayed from this model, and unfortunately, it has become a very divided and contentious platform. We can do better, and we need to. We need to elect legislators who will uphold the values that encompass ethical behavior. I will strive to be an ethical and compassionate legislator when elected.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Berkowitz has the next set of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. This is the last round, and we're doing well. First up will be David Reed, and the question: what is your top priority that you want to address if you are elected?
We need to fix education in the state of Maine. We need to bring our test scores back up. We need to make Maine students more proficient in important areas. We need to make sure that high schools have civics classes, have home ec classes, have industrial arts classes. We need to bring the trades back to school. We need to make the next generation of craftsmen. Aside from this, I think our schools need sufficient funding. I'm going to do my best with other things in the government budget to balance it so we can keep our rates, our percentage rates at 55%. Now, as far as other points on education, I support charter schools. I support school choice for parents. I think the money should follow the student, not go directly to the district. As far as parental rights, I think we do need a parental bill of rights at the state level. Parents should have a right to weigh in on their students' curriculum, and that's an important part of making our school districts work. I also would like to improve transparency both at our state universities and at our local school administrative districts. Because right now there are some things that happen behind closed doors that I think the public should know about. For example, under current FOIA law, many university committees are exempted, including some ones that handle some topics that people would want to know about. And I will bring that transparency to Augusta.
Thank you. And Gass, you're the next up.
Honestly, I'm pretty good at multitasking, so I plan to work on more than one thing at a time in Augusta. But at the top of my list is expanding housing opportunities, including but not limited to affordable housing. Having a home you can afford is pretty basic. High housing costs are a major factor behind the increasing homelessness that we all see in Maine. But even for those who have a home, too many are having to choose between their rent or mortgage payment and things like medications or food or other basic needs. Lack of workforce housing is also a huge barrier to economic development. Gray and New Gloucester have always been towns where people can afford to live. That's a big reason why my husband and I chose Gray back in 1988. But that's not really the case anymore. We have to do better, and we can. The state can provide tools and incentives to help towns plan for more residential development for both home purchase and rental. This could include accessory dwelling units as well as larger projects. Listing state-owned land or properties, or using state-owned land or properties is one way to help lower housing costs as well. Maine approved a senior affordable housing bond in 2015, and that model is a good one for, repeating but expanding it to include affordable housing for families as well.
Thank you. Amy Arata. No, I apologize. Teresa Purse. I'm ahead of myself.
Thank you so much. I too have a hard time picking just one top priority. We've done a lot of amazing work, particularly over the last 4 years. And I think if I were to talk about just global, like one big thing at the state level, we need to look at what we've done and how it's working and how we can continue it if it's doing a good job, and how we might need to tweak it or fix it or get rid of it if it hasn't. We need to maintain our 55% state funding for local communities for education. And we also, a perfect example of is a program working or not, we've invested $20 million in helping high school kids go to community college. We've seen a surge in people apply for that and attend, but is it doing what we want it to do? Is it getting them through the process? Is it landing them with a good job, getting them where they want to be? And we need to take a critical eye and look at how we spent that money. This is just one example, and make sure that things are doing what we think we want them to do, and are they doing it? But we also need to keep a keen eye on the next 6 months around the economy, and really particularly continuing to keep an eye on property tax relief for people who are in their homes, whether you're over 65 or not. It's a difficult time, and we need to look at some solutions there. We want to make sure that we maintain all of the healthcare things that we put into place. Those are great things. A healthier Maine will just make a healthier economy. And we also need to keep an eye on education. I mentioned the 55%, but our higher ed as well. We've invested some funds there. We're trying to keep tuition flat. What is that doing? They bring, the higher ed education brings in about $1 billion economically to our state. We need to keep an eye on that.
Thank you. Amy Arata.
Well, you've heard many priorities already, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and continue working on them. But there's one priority that's become personal, and that is that I get to finish my work evaluating Child Protective Services. You may have seen in the news that my committee, the Bipartisan Government Oversight Committee, is investigating the deaths of children who were killed even though they were involved with Child Protective Services. There were a record number of deaths last year, and we want to figure out why, so that we can prevent more deaths and injuries. There have been many studies of the system over the years, but nothing points to what's at the root of the problem. The answers we're getting from the department seem to say that everything's fine, but that's not what we're hearing from foster parents and others who work in the system. And the child deaths are evidence of a big problem. We want to look at the case files of 4 children who were killed, but DHHS won't allow this even though we've subpoenaed the records. It seems as if they're running out the clock, hoping that people like me lose my election and will just go away, leave them alone. On October 19th, we're going to vote on whether to go to court to get access to those records. This will probably drag on into the next legislative session. The testimony by Maddox Williams' grandmother about the absurd decisions by DHHS before his death was absolutely heartbreaking. I actually had to turn my camera away during the Zoom meeting because I was so upset and I didn't want to be a distraction. So I really need to be in the legislature so that I can continue to fight for kids like Maddox Williams.
Jennifer White, please.
There's more than one priority for me. I've always been one that multitasks, and I work best that way, actually. I want to address the issues we are dealing with in our state's economy and our education system. I heard Ann talk about housing and Amy talk about our foster kids, and I'll tell you those are big on my heart as well. I've worked with foster children over the years, and I have quite a bit I could say about that. Our economy and high inflation is affecting families financially. We do not need new taxes, and we need to cut taxes and costs for Mainers if we are able to. We need to help our businesses with their workforce shortages and remove unnecessary regulations. We need to attract a new workforce to fill the critical labor shortages that companies are experiencing. We need to get healthy and capable adults back to work. We need to make sure that we are doing our best job in helping vulnerable populations like our seniors, our foster children, and providing more programs and accessibility for those battling mental illness and drug addiction. In our education system, we need to refocus on teaching the fundamentals. National scores show us that our children are not getting the education they need. Instead, our schools have become battlegrounds over ideologies and politics. Let's make our schools true institutions of learning. Not every family shares the same perceptions and values, and we need to respect that across the board. Controversial topics are best to be discussed at home with trusted family members. Let's take a serious look at school choice and how that could not only provide educational choices to families, but it can also help schools to compete in a healthy way.
Thank you very much. Your time's out. Ann Graham?
Once again, there are an enormous amount of priorities that one could look at. The priority that I will focus on is comprehensive health care with a focus on mental health, a focus on prevention and treatment of mental health. We know that coming out of the pandemic, suicides are really unacceptable. We recently had a young middle schooler commit suicide in our neighboring town. You wonder why so much of this is happening. We need to talk about how we can prevent and treat mental illness. I had a bill in my previous experience in the legislature where we helped to bridge adolescents into adulthood who are at high risk of mental health problems. We know the highest incidence of severe mental health illnesses such as schizophrenia and bipolar disease happen between the ages of 18 and 25. It was passed, but it was not funded. We need to work on preventing substance abuse disorder. We need to work on mental health issues that affect the homeless. We know there's a high percentage of people who live on the streets of Portland, Lewiston, Bangor, even in the backwoods of our communities, who have significant mental health problems. We know that if we focus on mental health issues, we may be able to decrease gun violence. I believe that if we work on these issues, including working on prevention of child abuse and neglect, we will be a healthier Maine, and we'll have a healthier economy as well.
Thank you very much, Ann. At this point, we have 16 more minutes, and I'm going to ask the young lady in the front row, third from my right, to come up. And we're going to ask her to draw a name, actually a question out of the box, and we will pose it to all of the parties. You can't see them, and
Can you reach any higher?
Maybe after.
okay. Sharon Bondroff has asked the following. To be standing here tonight, you obviously think you deserve the job you are seeking. What makes you the right person to represent your community? That will be the question that all of you have the opportunity to respond to. What I will do, unless there is reason not to, I'm going back to round 1, and that will be round 7, and we'll just follow through. And as time goes on, we may be able to get 2 or 3 more questions. We'll see what happens. Round 1 starts with Ann Gass.
Thank you. So I'm an Indy clean elections candidate, as I said, because I'm committed to working for the people, not for the parties or big money donors. If you're not familiar with the Clean Elections Program, it's a state-funded voluntary program that the voters of Maine approved. What it requires of those of us who participate in it, that we can only fund our campaigns through getting $5 contributions from voters in the district. And then the state matches those. So what that means is, as a state rep, I wouldn't owe anything to anyone. And I think that's a beautiful thing. My only focus would be the voters in the district. I mean, I lived in Gray for 34 years, as I've mentioned, and that's long enough to remember the days when our meetings were often contentious. And even on the council, there was a fair amount of chaos and dysfunction. which was really discouraging and made it hard for the town to move forward. And I've been so heartened in recent years because we just don't do that anymore. And as I've talked to voters and as I've canvassed, people are really happy and excited with where Gray is and where we're going. I've been part of that change. It comes from authentic community engagement, transparency, keeping taxes low, which we did all 3 years I was on the council, and applying the rules fairly to everyone. So we've worked hard to create a positive vision for Gray, and that's what I want to continue doing in Augusta.
Thank you, Ann. Teresa Purse will be next.
Thank you. Well, for 14 years, I've been serving my communities, both first at the town level as a Falmouth Town Councilor for 6 years. I served twice there as chair. We were lucky enough to hold mill rates down during that time. It was a really difficult recession that we were in, and I'm proud of that work. I've taken that knowledge and understanding what goes on in municipalities up to the State House and been there for the last 8 years, where again I've served on multiple committees. I work across the aisle by bipartisanship. That's the first thing that I look to do before anything else, and I've had great success with that. I think that I am the right person to serve this greater community of the Senate District 25 because I have proven a history of working across party lines. I have the leadership skills and the experience necessary to get things done. And my record shows that. You don't have to guess about what I'm going to do. I've taken a lot of votes. I've had a lot of conversations, not only with the district, but also at the state level. And you can be assured that I will continue in that same path. I look forward to representing the people of Senate District 25.
Thank you. Amy Arata is next.
Thank you. I guess that my biggest qualification is the broad range of experience that I have in my life. From milking cows to cloning DNA in a bacteria in a laboratory, to working on the planning board, to volunteering, the homeless outreach ministry in California, which is where I got to know my husband. I've been a mom. I am still a mom, an old mom. And right now I work a lot outdoors and working on properties, painting, cleaning, whatever needs to be done, I go ahead and get it done. I've also proven that I am bipartisan. Every single bill that I've submitted in the last 4 years in the legislature has had a Democrat as a co-sponsor. I've also co-sponsored bills with Democrats. One example is the housing bill that I worked on with the Speaker of the House. I've also written op-eds with Democrats, including Senator Claxton regarding the pandemic. We wanted to take a more scientific approach to reopening things quicker in rural towns such as New Gloucester and Gray. So I've proven that I can do this, and I think I still have more good ideas, and I guess that's why you should vote. And I don't have any big donors. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Jennifer White, please.
Hi, I am also a clean elections candidate like Ann, and I feel like I would be a good legislator and represent up in Augusta for our communities here, because just living here, being a mom and a business owner, I've had a lot of experiences, even through this pandemic. I have a child that was in school and abruptly had to stay home, and basically her world was turned upside down. Working with children for decades now, I've been able to see the hardships of families that come through my doors. We have families that come that some are well off and some are in foster care. And I've been able to really just try to be an advocate and make the phone calls and try to find resources for those families that come through my doors that need the help. And working with teenagers at the local high schools, I've done trips with them and taken them to an Indian reservation, taken them for a Hurricane Katrina cleanup. I've tried to it's really important, I think, to give our young people real life experiences so that they can see beyond what they see in their regular day-to-day life. And I just have a really wide variety of experiences with people in other cultures, and I just feel like I would represent our district well, and I really hope that you will vote for me for state senate.
Thank you, Ann. And David Reed.
Are we going in the order of the first one?
Actually, it's me.
That would be Ann.
You're absolutely right. I stand corrected.
I'm the right person to represent our communities of Gray and North Yarmouth. I served on the select board 2 3-year terms in North Yarmouth, and I think the biggest reason I am the right person to represent these communities is because I listen. I listen to the needs of the people in my community. I don't follow a particular party platform or particular divisive politics. Even when I don't agree with someone, I certainly will listen, and I'll try to find common ground. I want to fight problems, not people. That's why I should be your next state representative.
Thank you. And David Reed.
Okay, I find this somewhat humorous, but I just need to point one thing out. I took the time to write up my own platform because I wanted to differentiate myself in some areas from my own party. Now, for the record, on Angram's website, it does link to the Democrat Party platform. I like to consider myself a maverick. I don't always fit in, but I'm a hard worker, and I'll try to get things done for the people of my district. I will always put the people of my district first. I will listen to anyone who has a concern and wants to come with me or come and talk to me. I have my number out there publicly available. I did that as a selectman, and I will continue to do that as a state representative. I will try to be accessible at as many hours in the day as possible for you, the people of Gray and North Yarmouth. And that is why you should elect me to be your next state representative. Thank you.
Before we go on, I want to remind the candidates, this is not an opportunity to ditch the other candidates, but to express your points of views. And the chair, the co-chairs do take this very seriously. Thank you. No.
Okay, we have time for one more question from the audience before closing statements. And if the gentleman in the third row with the neatly trimmed beard would come up and draw the box. Yes, that's you.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks good.
Thank you.
This question, starting with Teresa, is if a bill comes up to restrict a woman's access to abortion in any way, how will you vote? Would you prohibit public funding of abortions? Would you ban abortions earlier in a pregnancy? And the writer is anonymous. So starting with Teresa. Oh, I'm almost looking at
No worries at all. Thank you so much for the question. I think we had this question earlier tonight about reproductive rights, and I unequivocally will protect a woman's right to choose in the state of Maine. We have that in our law. We've had it since 1973, I believe, and it's really just codified Roe v. Wade at the time. I will do nothing that would ebb away at that. We're seeing this across the United States, and I will not do that in our state. I've taken votes that have stopped things from ebbing away at a woman's right to choose, making it more difficult. I've voted to pass a bill where you can't harass people who are maybe going into a reproductive rights healthcare place where they would gather that and get that information and that healthcare. So I don't need the 90 seconds to say that that's what I'm going to do. You can rest assured, and I have a voting record to prove it.
Thank you. Amy.
Well, every decision needs to be made with compassion, truth, and fairness first in mind. And LD 820 was the bill that passed taxpayer-funded abortion in 2019. And prior to that, Maine Care paid for elective abortion, or did not pay for elective abortions. They only paid for abortions that were to save the life of the mother or because of rape or incest. And LD 820 originally was going to have a big fiscal note so that it wasn't going to really fit into the budget. And these fiscal notes are prepared by nonpartisan staff. They're a calculation of what they think the bill will cost. And so at first we had this one large number. And then somebody talked to this nonpartisan staff member. And then suddenly the fiscal note was just $600,000. And then later on, the department head said that we could absorb that with existing resources. And then, so the money went into the budget and came back out of the budget again as a fiscal note. I just felt like this was a very dishonest way to present it. And so yes, I would vote to repeal taxpayer-funded abortion. If people want free abortions, Planned Parenthood has hundreds of millions of dollars that's been donated to them that they can spend on that instead of Maine taxpayers. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Hi, I have to agree with what Amy said. I do not support tax-funded abortions. We have other programs like Planned Parenthood, and our tax dollars should not be spent on that, and that's where I stand on it.
Ann Graham? Ann?
I will reiterate that abortion should be rare, safe, and legal. In relation to the Hyde Amendment, I think it's a travesty that just because you're poor, you're not allowed to have reproductive choice. I support public funding for abortion, and I will work with my colleagues in the legislature to stand for a women's right to choose at every level. And just quickly, Mr. Reed pointed out something, that there were no exclusions. I will say that I do not think it's appropriate or fair or right to make a woman carry a child who's died in utero to full term.
Wow.
Thank you. David?
I would like to point out that under Maine's current law for a medical issue past viability, abortion is still allowed under our current laws, which I will protect if elected to the State House. I also do not support tax funding for abortion. It is a 46-year-old bipartisan compromise supported by 107 Democrats and over 90 Republicans. It is something that should stand the test of time. And as pointed out by other members here, there are other options available. Planned Parenthood exists and other charities that would provide someone with abortion coverage if they want it. Women will have a choice in Maine regardless.
And Ann Gass?
Thanks. As I said earlier, I'm a strong advocate for women's reproductive rights, including using taxpayer funds through Maine Care to help women who are poor have the abortions that they want. As I watch what's happening in the other states around the country right now, though, it's clear to me that we need to be concerned not just about abortion rights, but about efforts to criminalize pregnancy. And there are women in this country right now who are in jail because they had miscarriages or stillbirths, and prosecutors, for some reason, feel like they did something that, that caused that to happen. For me, this is personal. I had 3 miscarriages before I had my first child, and so in a different state, in the wrong state, potentially I could be prosecuted for that. My daughter had an ectopic pregnancy last year. If she lived in the wrong state, she could have struggled to get life-saving medical care because the procedures used to deal with that are the same as those used for abortions. And so that's why, I just think it's so important for women to have equality and to have the freedom to choose whether or not to continue a pregnancy.
We are on schedule. We will have no further questions, but we will allow, in the continued rotation, a 1-minute summary from each of the candidates. And starting out will be Amy Arata.
You said 1.5 minutes.
Did I say 1.5?
It was in the list.
You just said.
We can go 1.5. My boss says it's okay.
Hey, because it just so happens I have 1.5 minutes
No
worth
doubt.
of stuff to say. Well, I want to say that it's been such a pleasure to spend the last decade serving the community. First as a GNG school board member and now as a state representative. You know by now that I work hard and treat everybody with civility and strive to be a representative that you can be proud of. My goal is to make rational, intelligent decisions based on facts and not emotion, but temper that with the kindness and compassion that all public servants should have. I hope you can see that I'm running for the right reasons. I'm certainly not doing this to be popular. Indeed, when you make hard decisions, you can't be popular with everybody. Over the last 4 years, I voted on thousands of bills. And can you imagine the chaos and the expense if we passed every single bill? A good legislator needs to have the courage to vote no more often than not, in spite of attacks that we know will come. I listen to everybody without judgment and try to understand others' points of view. I have and will continue to cross party lines when needed in order to benefit you. I've proven over and over again that I care more about what benefits Maine than what benefits my party. I've worked hard to get you tax relief while making sure our most vulnerable people are taken care of. Gray is an amazing town, the crossroads of Maine, with a rich history from the grave of the stranger to the Mayall Mill, and it would be such a privilege to be your representative. Again, my name is Amy Arata, and I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you. And everyone else gets 1.5 minutes too. Next will be Jennifer White.
First, I would just like to thank the town of Gray for putting this on tonight. I think it has been productive, and it's been really good to hear all of us share. We are living in unprecedented times in our state and country. As a mother and small business owner, I am concerned at the direction our state is moving in. As we navigate this post-COVID era, we need legislators in Augusta to work together in a bipartisan manner to make responsible and ethical decisions. The future of our children and grandchildren are at stake. It would be my great honor to represent Senate District 25 in Augusta as your next senator. If given the opportunity, I will be your voice. I know firsthand the challenges that inflation and the economy are having on families and businesses. The cost of energy, food, and housing are at an all-time high. I will not support legislation that will increase our taxes and household expenses. I will support legislation that is pro-business and will help our businesses. I also want to help our schools by supporting legislation that will bring better transparency in classrooms, build stronger partnerships with families, and allow school choice for our students. Those that know me well know that I have no problem working across the aisle, connecting with people from all backgrounds and political parties. In the business world, I like to get things done proactively as much as possible. I take into consideration how my actions and decisions will affect others. If elected to represent you as your next senator, I commit to doing the same. I will not let partisan politics get in the way of me making the best decisions for the people of Maine. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. David Reed.
As you've seen, oh yeah, that's right, Ann's next. Sorry, Ann.
No problem,
That's the
Did I
second
do it
time
again?
that's happened. Yes,
Sorry.
no problem.
Thank you, David.
welcome.
Thank you to the town of Gray, and more importantly, thank you to the people of Gray and North Yarmouth who have welcomed me at their doors over the past several months. When I go to their doors, they ask me, why do you want to do this? With great incredulity. And I tell them a story, and that story is about my dad. My dad was a surgeon in Bangor, where I grew up. And when I first wanted to run, now 15 years ago, he said, how can you leave caring for patients? And I said, Dad, I am. I'm going to care for patients. I'm going to care for people in a very important way. I feel strongly that someone like me needs to have a voice in Augusta. I also believe that government can work for all of us. That Abraham Lincoln said that the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's what we do. That's what I will do. I've had the experience and the wisdom to get things done for all of the people of our communities. I understand the voices and the needs of Gray and North Yarmouth, and I will be a strong and respected voice working hard for all the people in my district and the people of our state. Please vote on November 8th. My name is Annie Graham, to all my friends, who you all are. Ann Graham on the ballot. I ask for your vote on November 8th, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
David?
As you have seen through my positions tonight, there is another path forward, one that does not embrace one extreme as a response to the other, one that can unite moderate Democrats, independents, and Republicans. As has been proved repeatedly, a house divided cannot stand. We must focus on what unifies us in our humanity instead of focusing on narratives meant to foment racial hatred, divide American families, and create violence in our nation. We must cast aside identity politics and fear-mongering. We must focus on building a stronger economy in Maine, fixing our education system, and preserving the natural and constitutional rights of the Maine people. I ask for your vote this November 8th. It's time to send someone new to Augusta. Someone who is not a cog in a party machine. Someone who looks out for the interests of their community, not for special interest groups or out-of-state actors. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Gass, please.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for coming tonight. Really, it's great to see this room filled. To the people of Gray, you know me. I've been here for 34 years. I've been working for you all that time in one way, shape, or form. And I approach this work with a lot of humility because I've done a lot of listening over the years and learned what I didn't know and what I needed to know in order to do this work well. I bring to this work, as I mentioned, my small business experience. My clients are nonprofits and local and state governments. I help them develop and fund programs that help people in need lead stable, productive lives. One measure of my success, as I mentioned, is I've written 100 successful federal grants to the tune of over $168 million, and most of that money came to Maine to fund programs dealing with homelessness, refugee resettlement, programs for disadvantaged kids, solutions to the opioid epidemic, and to broadband expansion, many other things. On the council, I had to take the lead on a lot of different initiatives, including food sovereignty, bike ped planning, complete streets, and many more. We didn't all agree, and I had to do a lot of back and forth to get to that sweet spot where we could pass things. But that's the work that I love to do. It's what I believe in, and it's where my heart is. And I hope that you'll agree I'm the best candidate for this position and vote Indy for a change.
Thank you. Teresa, please.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the town of Gray again for hosting this event, and like to thank the big audience that we have here in person watching, and also those people who took time to tune in at home. This is an important election, and having the opportunity to hear and learn about what the candidates stand for helps everyone make the choice that they're going to need to do on November 8th or before voting started today. Serving for the past 8 years in the legislature, I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish on many, many bipartisan levels, from healthcare to education, dental care, working to increase the workforce, making sure we have a strong economic plan, protecting Maine's women's reproductive rights, and we quadrupled the rainy day fund, which just puts us in strong fiscal place in case we do go into a downturn with our economy. I'm very, very proud of all that work. I'm particularly proud that Gray received an additional $11.2 million for the K through 12 education fund with the increase that we did that, and also an additional $1.3 million for the from the revenue sharing plan. If elected, I will continue to protect all of these things and do this work. but there's still work to do. And I want to use my experience and my proven history of working across the aisle with all members of the legislature to find pragmatic, common sense solutions for all Mainers and help our communities grow and thrive, because the best of Maine is yet to come. It's been my pleasure and privilege to serve in the House of Representatives. I would be honored and humbled to have your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates for showing tonight. They took a great deal of your time and effort and changing their schedules and calendars to make this forum. So thank you very much to each one of you, and thank you to the people of Gray for hosting this candidates forum so the people can be well informed and better their thought process as to who to vote for. And Mitch.
Thank you. First, thank you, Brad, for co-hosting and co-moderating. Mrs. Berkowitz, thank you for being the time person. And to all of you, my forgetful memory, I appreciate the fact that you reminded me the sequences. Appreciate that. We are appreciative of you as candidates. The public is appreciative of the fact that you were able to explain your positions a little bit more. That's the function of government at our level. I want to thank the town of Gray, Community TV Channel 2, and most of all, our town manager, who felt that we need to get people involved in the electoral process, regardless of their position politically. Thank you. Appreciate it, Nate. I would be remiss if I too did not remind you that absentee ballots are now available, and you may also vote on November 8th from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you are not registered to vote, you have time to do so, but don't hesitate. Don't be the person on the 9th says, I wish I did, because you didn't. Thank you all, and good evening on behalf of the town of Gray.